In this lecture, we're going to be talking about methods, how to create method, how to call them. So here we have a class called calculator, and then there's the main method we're going to use later. Remember, the main method is the method that executes the statements. Okay, so what is a method? Why do we need a method? Well, a method is a set of statements that perform a specific task. That's exactly the definition of method. And we use it to make our program more efficient because we don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over. So create a method, that means we create a code for that task, and then every time we want to perform that task, we just call the method instead of writing the same code. So which makes our program robust and more efficient. So let's have an example of a method. Let's say I want to create a method. Let's say make a comment here. A method that adds two numbers and returns the total. So this is how you write a method. First, we need to start with the heading. So a public. Okay, you have two choices, either public or private, depending on whether you want your method to be used, to be accessed, or you want it to be private. So most of the methods are public, but there are certain situations when you want to make your method private. And then static. So for now, we're not going to worry about static. We're going to explain it later. But basically, simply the static means we have only one copy, one instance. It's like a class method. But don't worry about it for now. We're going to go over it later on. And then after that, we have it's called the return type. Is this method returning something or not? So we have two types of method. We have the return method and we have the void method. The void means does not return anything. It's like perform a task but does not return anything. So we're going to have an example of both. So let's say in this case, we have a return method because it says right here, return the total. So this method returns a total, and then you have to specify what data type. Let's say integer. And then you have to give the name of the method. We're going to call it add or sum. And then you have the parentheses, and then if there are any parameters, you need to include them here. So if I ask somebody, okay, can you add two numbers for me? His question is, okay, give me the numbers. So anything that you need to perform that specific task, you need to include it in your parameters. That is, we need two numbers, A and B. This is basically the heading, okay? You start with the visibility, public or private. Sometimes we use static, sometimes we don't. We'll explain it later. And then the return type. It could be integer, it could be double, it could be character, it could be string, it could be something else. And then the name of the method, and then the parentheses, and then the parameters. Sometimes you may not need any parameters. So sometimes you just have empty parentheses. But in our case here, adding, you need two numbers. And then I'm going to calculate the total. I'm going to declare a local variable here, total, which is A plus B. And then you're going to return. Return is a Java keyword that we use to return something. So here we're going to return the total. So you accepted two numbers, you add them up, and then you return the total. That's basically what the return method is. Now you don't have to add this statement. You can just put like directly return A plus B. But for organizational purposes, sometimes you want to save them in a variable first before you return them. So I prefer to save them in a variable first. So this way, especially like when some methods are complicated, it is better to save them in a variable. So I'm going to put total equals A plus B, and then you return the total. So that's an example of a method that returns something here. Now, what about, no, here, this is the method, okay? The method, no, if you try to run the program, nothing will happen. Why? Because you created the method, but you never called the method. It's only when you call the method that something will take place. Like, for example, right here in the main method, I can print statement by calling the method. Let's say add. Look right here, add. That means I can call this method. Now, as you can see right here, it requires two numbers, two integers. So I'm going to put here, for example, 5 and 7. And when I run the program, what's going to happen is Java will go and search for that method if it exists, and then check if the parameters are matching. Here we have integer, two integers, and then here we have two integers, so they match. So if you have something else, then you're going to get an error. Make sure the name is the same, and then it will return the total, so which is 5 plus 7. So you can see right here it says 12. Okay, so here we create the method, here we call the method. Now because we are using a return method, I can save it. So for example, I can put something like this, sum, and I can put add 5 plus 7. That's means save it, because if it's returning something, you can do whatever you want to do. You can print it, you can save it, you can do whatever you want. That's why they call it return. It returns a value back to you. Okay, and then it's up to you. You can save it or print it. Okay, so let's just keep it as a statement of printing statement. So I have add 5 and 7. So this is an example of return method. Now we have another type of method. It's called void method. So let's say we're going to create a method that prints a welcoming statements. So we're going to have public, static. Now instead of like putting the return type, we're going to put void. So let's say this method called welcome, and accept a string called name, and then all what it does is just print statement saying welcome whatever the name is, welcome Bob, welcome Mike, and stuff like that. So here we're not going to return anything. Remember, every time you have a void method, there is no return statement. So we're going to put, for example, right here, welcome, and then we're going to put the name, whatever the name might be. This is not a return statement. So as you can see, nothing will happen until you call the method. So let's call the method here. Now here, since it does not return anything, I'm just going to call the method directly welcome. And then here I'm going to put Bob. I try to build it, run it, it's going to print. So Java will go search for that method and then execute any statement you have inside. So it's going to say welcome Bob. So we said that the void method is not a return. This means I cannot save it. If I try to save it, I'm going to get an error. So if, for example, I'm going to put str and then I put welcome Bob, like the first example. I'm going to get an error because this method does not return anything. So you cannot save something that you don't have. So if I try to build it, you're going to get an error, incompatible type. This is a void method, and then you have a variable. That means you are assuming it's a return method. So there's a conflict here. So a void method does not return anything. Okay, so let's keep it as welcome Bob. So let's have another example. Okay. So let's say I'm going to create a method that accepts two strings and concatenate them. Just put them side by side. So I'm going to put public, static. Now, if I put two strings, I'm going to return both of them together. That's another string. So the return type is string. I'm going to call it concatenate. It accepts two parameters. Both of them are string. Like first name, last name, you put them together, something like that. So string n2. So now, since it is a return, how do I know it's a return? There is a type here, string, integer, double, boolean, char, whatever it is. If it does not return, it should say void, like the welcome method. So here we're going to put return n1, and then maybe like a space between them, and then n2. So all what this method does is just put the two names that you provided side by side. So as you can see right here, when I call the method system out print line, call the method concatenate, and then I'm going to put, for example, John. Sure that the parameters, the arguments, match with the parameters here. So if you have two string, you need to have two string as well. So John and then Baker, for example. After run the program, it's going to return what? The two names side by side. Let me see, did I miss anything here? Let me build it and see. It looks like we have an error here. Void type not allowed here. Oh yeah, because here we said that it does not return anything, so just call the method directly. Wow. Okay, so if I run the program, so you're gonna see concatenate, you just put the two names together. Let's create another method. Let's say a method that returns true if the number is even, false otherwise. So public static. Now what's the return type if it's true or false? The return type is Boolean, because that's true or false. And then let's say we can call it is even. Accept a number, integer, call it num. So remember, whatever the return type is, has to be the true or false. You cannot return a number, you cannot return a string. So you have to check first if num. How do we check if it's even? So we use the modulus. 2 equals 0. So if the number has a remainder of 0, we can say return true. Else, because else means that the number has a remainder different than 0, obviously 1. That means it is an odd number. So here you can put return false. Okay, now let's call the method and see. So I'm going to put a system out print line, and then I'm going to call it is even, and then let's say 18. So 18 is an even number, so it should return true. So that's why we have true here. See, if I use 21, which is an odd number, so it's going to return false. Now, I can take advantage of this method to create another method. Let's say I'm going to create another method called add also, but adds 3 numbers, not only 2. 3 numbers and returns the total. Now, if you look right here, we already have a method, but this method accepts only 2 numbers. So how can I add 3 numbers? So I'm going to create another method. As long as it is different, you can still call another method with the same name, as long as it's different. Like either the number of parameters is different, or the type are different, or the sequence is different. Okay, so we're gonna create a method. Okay, called public static. It returns also integer, because when we add, we can return an integer. We're gonna call it add, but it accepts 3 numbers, A, B. As you can see, I keep using the same parameters, A, B, C. There's no confusion here. Why? Because these variables are local. That means this A, B, C, I can use them only within this method. They are not recognized outside. So even though I used A, B before, but this A, B are different A, B. That means they are used only within the method they are defined. So they are local variables. So here, since I already have the method that adds 2 numbers, so I'm going to call that method. So I'm going to put return. Let's call the method add, the one that accepts 2 numbers. So I'm going to put A and B or B and C or A and as long as they are two. And then I'm going to add the remaining one. So here I took advantage of the method that already exists. Okay, so now if I call the method add, see I have two options here because I have two different methods. So I'm going to use the one that accepts 3 and then it say 5 comma 10. Now how does the computer know which method, since they are the same method, based on the arguments? So if I put 3, so Java knows that I'm going to be using the last one. If I have only 2, then Java realized that it's the first one. So I'm going to put, let's say here, 15 and then 8, for example. So if I run the program, okay, so it's going to add all these 3 numbers, which is 23. So this is how you create a method and how you call them. We're going to go a little bit deeper into the method later on, but this is basically the definition of the method and just how to create and call one. Okay, so thank you for watching and see you in the next lecture.